Feeling fat is not a feeling. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, or if it's your first time, welcome to my channel. My name is Marlene. I talk about eating disorder recovery, my own personal experiences, and everything related to healing the relationship with food, movement, and your body. And let's dive in right into the topic as we always do. Today we're going to talk about body checking. So for those of you who don't know what body checking is, it can be everything. So for some people it is like checking yourself constantly in the mirror, not being able to walk by a window without checking yourself. Or for some people it's like certain measurements. It can be a certain pair of jeans, a belt, or always using your hands in order to see if you can still feel your bones or if your hand fits around like certain parts of your body. I don't want to get too deep into examples because I know that it can be very triggering, but basically body checking is everything related to checking the size of your body. And it is very common in people with eating disorders. When I was in the depth of my eating disorder and I was like heavily underweight, I would constantly do body checking. I had like certain measurements that I would use in order to see if I'm still like skinny enough, if I'm still underweight enough, because on some days I wouldn't even see myself correctly in the mirror. So I would look in the mirror and I would see myself as a very fat person when I was actually not. And so I used body checking because it kind of calmed me down in the moment, but I didn't realize how harmful it could be. And body checking is also something that happens a lot in eating disorder recovery, because you're like so concentrated on every single ounce or gram of weight that you gain that you constantly check your body. My body checking was even worse when I was in recovery. I would like constantly use my fingers, like check if I have fat somewhere, look into the mirror. Like I couldn't like really keep my hands off myself, which sounds very weird, but I mean it in a way where I was like constantly checking if I would get fat already. And this kept me in this concentration on my weight. And like every time I had eaten, I would like touch my belly and see if I had gained weight. So it's like very obsessive. And for some people it's like seriously OCD-ish. And it's very, very hard to stop body checking. So I got a couple of questions about body checking and how to stop it. So I'm always a big fan of writing things down. So my first attempt would be to like write down, why are you checking your body? I mean, if you're in recovery, you know that you have to change something, and hopefully you know that weight gain is probably necessary for you. I don't care if you come from a very, very low weight or from a quote unquote healthy BMI range, because if your body is gaining weight during recovery, it's needed, like no matter where you are coming from. I don't care if some doctor tells you, oh, this is your BMI, you don't have to gain weight. If your body gains weight in recovery, it's needed because your body is way smarter than you think. Oftentimes, body checking is one attempt of the eating disorder to stick around. I always say things scream when they are dying, and so do eating disorders. So once you start recovery, your eating disorder will scream even louder. So it will scream when you eat. It will scream when you see a higher number on the scale. It will scream if you have to get bigger clothes, all these kind of things. So body checking is kind of your eating disorder's attempt to like keep control, because recovery can feel like a loss of control. It seriously can feel like this, and that's what makes it so hard, even though you're gaining back control, because that's what recovery is. When I look at my old self and at myself right now, I gained back control over my life. But still in recovery, it felt like I was losing control because I was giving up the control I had over my body in a very unhealthy way for like a decade. So body checking is your eating disorder's attempt to stay in control, even if it's false control. And it's also the high concentration on your weight, the fear of weight gain, which needs to be attacked because, as I said before, your body knows best. And so the fear of weight gain is probably like one of the biggest issues people in recovery have, including myself. Like, again, I was like very, very underweight, and I identified myself as an anorexic person. I did everything in my power to stay at this low weight before I chose recovery. And so, quote unquote, losing this low weight felt like the biggest fear to me. And I had to go through it. I personally had to attack my recovery from a very scientific standpoint because emotionally I was just not able to do the right thing. So I had to use my brain, even though somebody once told me that I had starved away my brain, but it's still working, I promise. It's still in here. So I had to use my brain and my knowledge and the science and all the content that I watched about eating disorders to finally choose recovery. And so I knew that I had to sit with it. And every time I would like try to body check, I like had to stop myself. And like for the first couple of weeks, I like wasn't really successful with it because it's like so subconscious. Like you just do it and you don't even think about it. It's something that many people do like all day long. So it can be helpful if you have a safe person to ask them to let you know when you're doing it, but it's also like oftentimes connected with a lot of shame. So if that makes you feel even worse, you don't have to do it, but try to be conscious of your body checking, because in the end, body checking doesn't help you at all. It will only make you feel worse because it's an eating disorder habit, and we want to create healthy habits. So we want to create recovery habits. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you if you still do body checking, because it's normal. It's like very natural that you still, keep having those eating disorder habits for quite some while, which is why we're doing recovery. If it would be so easy, we wouldn't have to go through this, right? But we have to if we really want to get healthy. And for me, I had a few recovery attempts within those 10 years. And because I quote unquote failed, which was basically just my fear and that I didn't understand that I can't be too emotionally, because emotions mean you have to rely on your motivation, and your motivation comes and goes. And in recovery, there will be a lot of days where you don't feel any motivation. So you can't rely on your motivation or on your emotions, because your emotions for probably the first few weeks or even month will feel very negative. And I'm not saying this to discourage anyone, but it is the truth. I can promise you that they will get way better, that you will feel way more positive after a while. But for the first couple of weeks or month, you will feel very down and very negative. And to know that it will go away, to know that it will get better, helped me sticking with recovery, because I was like, do I really want to live this life? I had this big list in my head of things that I wanted to do. First of all, moving to California, being able to work a full-time job, which I was not. I was clearly not able to do anything like this. I mean, I worked for myself, but I was not able to do all the things I wanted to do, to travel, to have a family eventually, all these kind of things. So I had this list in my head and this life that I actually wanted to live, but then I also had 10 years of an eating disorder, all those habits which I repeated for 10 years. So it was kind of burnt into my brain, which is why it feels so hard to get rid of it. But I always refer to neural rewiring, which is possible, and it doesn't take 10 years. It doesn't. I had somebody telling me your recovery will last as long as your eating disorder sticks around, which is not true. It can be true for some people, but this is not something you can just say. Again, I had an eating disorder for 10 years, and I would say that I was fully recovered after 2 years, maybe even a little bit less. So you can't just measure it like this. So don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Your own recovery is unique, and it takes as long as it takes. But it doesn't mean that you have to be in recovery for a decade if you were suffering from an eating disorder for a decade. But back to body checking. So these habits are incredibly hard to get rid of, but it is possible, and it won't take you 10 years, I promise. So again, for me, it was very helpful to be conscious, instead of doing it, it's like a little tick actually, you just do it and you don't even feel it. And again, then I was ashamed and all these kind of things. So I had to learn to let go, because I remember one day I had the realization, and it was your body checking is still a big part of your eating disorder, but you're currently in recovery, which means you're trying to get rid of your eating disorder. So why do you still engage in disordered habits? So I had to quit cold turkey. That was actually what I did with all my habits. I had to stop completely. I had to stop working out. I had to stop calorie counting. I had to stop using artificial sweetener, and I had to stop body checking. And of course, it didn't just go away from one day to another, but I promised myself to stop it. And every time I would engage in those body checking habits, whether it was looking at me in the mirror all the time or checking certain body parts with my hands, I would immediately stop. And it can also be helpful to find something else to do. I know it probably sounds a little bit funny to some of you, but it can be very helpful to, for some people, there are amazing skills out there. You can have a certain ring that you play with. You can have a little oil that you smell, anything else to simulate your senses, because in the end it's also a sense thing, right? You watch yourself in the mirror, or feel your skin, feel your bones, or not feel your bones anymore. So it can be helpful to like replace the one stimulant with another and like use another sense, for instance. Again, if it's like a certain skill that you feel that you use your hand for, if it's a smell, something like this. And then also like be conscious about what you're trying to do. Because for me, there came a point where I was like, I have to let my body do what it needs to do. I have extreme hunger. I have to like eat everything. Like I have to give in my mental and my physical extreme hunger. And I just have to surrender. I have to let go of all of this false control that I created for 10 years. So for me, it was like, again, like one day where I was like so over it, because body checking always made me feel worse in recovery. Because of course my body changed a lot in a very short amount of time, which it needed to do. My body was like literally trying to survive, and it finally got rest and it finally got food. So of course it would put on weight very quickly. And of course this was the worst feeling for me. But a little part of me also knew that I don't want to live this restrictive life anymore, and that I eventually want to be recovered. And so I was like, okay, if I have to go through this, and if I have to put on so much weight and have to be this person for a couple of years even, I have to make sure I'm not restricting anymore. And I have to give my body this leap of faith, which can be incredibly hard, but I think it's the best thing to do. Just give your body a leap of faith, and your body needs some time to like start trusting you again, because your body was basically in a famine for so long. So it just makes sense that it wants to survive and that it wants to put some extra weight on, and just in case another famine will occur. So it's your responsibility to not let that happen, to not let your body feel like it's in a famine again. And if you take the responsibility to like eat consistently, eat as much as you feel you want to eat. Like, don't just eat 3 meals and a couple of snacks. Eat whenever you feel like it. Eat at night, eat at day, rest, eat. And again, I know how hard it is, but just be aware that these things will get better. I promise you that. I was in a position where I felt like so depressed, because I was like, I don't want to go back. I really can't live this life anymore. But I feel so bad as well, like now that I'm in recovery. So I will like, no matter which way I choose, I will feel miserable forever. Well, it turns out that's not the truth, because that was me in recovery. Recovered me is amazing. Like, I'm doing great, guys. I'm not miserable anymore because I'm recovered. But being in recovery is this weird in-between space. And for a lot of people, that means feeling miserable. And I'm really sorry to tell you that, because I know that it would be way easier if I would be, oh no, recovery is always like sunshine and rainbows. For some people it is, and for some, and like on some days it was like this for me, like to finally be able to eat out again, to finally grab some ice cream again. But there were also a lot of other days where it was hard. But engaging in like old behaviors like body checking will only make it harder. So be aware why you're doing this, if it aligns with your ultimate goal, which is like a recovered life. If you need someone to point it out to you, and if it feels safe for you and doesn't create any shame, do that. It's also fine if you don't want to do that. You can look for like other skills, like stimulate your senses in another way. And ultimately, for me personally, I also started to feel more than to judge, because before that I was always like judging my body. I was judging the size, I was judging the number on the scale, I was judging the way I looked, I was judging how many steps I walked and how much I've eaten. None of this is very intuitively. So I started to feel more. And also like getting in touch and like feeling yourself in your body can be very hard in the first couple of months, because you will feel very different, especially if your weight changes. But I started to concentrate more on the feelings I had about the things I was able to do again, like eating with my family again, grabbing ice cream again, having a night out without counting any calories, and like eating something at the end of the night out because I was craving something. So I was trying to focus on those emotions rather on those false emotions of, oh, I feel fat, because that's not a feeling. Feeling fat is not a feeling. Feeling fat can be like, I feel like I'm failing, I feel like I'm losing control, I feel like other people don't desire me anymore, all those things. But feeling fat is not an emotion. So I really hope that it helped a little bit. Again, I know how hard it is and it will take some time. You won't just stop body checking from one day to another and then everything will be okay. I wish it would be that easy, but it isn't, but I promise you it is worth it. So if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching my videos. Thank you so much for commenting. I got a lot of questions recently, which shows me that you guys are really watching my content. And also, you can always reach out. We're creating a community here that is supposed to feel safe. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. You don't have to be ashamed. You don't have to feel guilty. This is a safe space for everyone. And I promise you, probably like 99% of the questions you have were the questions I had when I was in recovery, because sometimes we forget that a lot of people have like similar experiences. Even though like each recovery journey is different, we all kind of struggle with the same things. So again, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one as always.